The city of steel and glass never truly sleeps, but it often forgets to breathe. For Sophia, life had become a series of glowing screens, urgent emails, and the relentless rhythmic ticking of a clock that seemed to move faster with every passing year. In the high-rise offices where she spent her days, time was measured in quarterly reports and missed deadlines. But back in the quiet, rolling hills of the countryside, time was measured differently. There, time was measured in the deepening lines around a pair of kind eyes, and the slow, steady fading of a garden that once bloomed with wild abandon. It was a Friday evening, the kind where the air feels heavy with the exhaustion of a long week. Sophia stood at the bus terminal, her knuckles white, as she gripped the handle of her suitcase. The fluorescent lights overhead hummed with a sterile buzzing energy that grated on her nerves. Her phone buzzed, a notification for a meeting on Monday, but she ignored it. Her eyes were fixed on the digital departure board. Her bus was delayed. Again. Every minute felt like an hour. Today wasn't just any Friday. It was her grandmother's birthday. Not just any birthday, but a milestone that whispered of the fragility of life. Her grandmother, the woman who had taught her how to whistle through a blade of grass and how to find the North Star in a crowded sky, was turning 85. As Sophia finally boarded the late bus, the engine groaned to life like an old man waking from a deep slumber. She slumped into her seat, the vinyl cold against her skin. The bus was nearly empty, filled only with the ghosts of weary travelers and the dim, amber glow of the cabin lights. As the city lights began to blur into long, shimmering streaks of gold and red, Sophia leaned her head against the window. The vibration of the glass against her temple felt like a heartbeat. She thought about how many times she had canceled these trips. Next month, she would tell herself. I'll go when the project is finished. I'll go when the weather is better. I'll go when I'm not so tired. But the truth was, the world doesn't wait for us to be ready. Our grandparents grow older every day, wishing only that we visit a little more. They don't want the expensive gifts we send to compensate for our absence. They don't want the hurried 5-minute phone calls where we spend half the time checking our watches. They want our presence. They want to see how the light catches our eyes when we laugh. They want to hear the mundane details of our lives, not because they care about the corporate ladder, but because they care about us. The bus wound its way through the darkened countryside. Outside, the towering skyscrapers had been replaced by the skeletal silhouettes of oak trees and the occasional glimmer of a farmhouse porch light. Sophia closed her eyes, and suddenly she was 6 years old again. She could smell the scent of flour and cinnamon that always clung to her grandmother's kitchen. She could feel the rough, calloused texture of her grandmother's palm as they walked through the woods, collecting pine cones. Her grandmother had always been a pillar of strength, a constant in a world that felt increasingly chaotic. But during her last visit, Sophia had noticed the way her grandmother's steps had shortened. She noticed the way her hands trembled slightly when she poured the tea. The pillar was still there, but it was weathering. The realization hit Sophia with a sharp, cold pang of guilt. We often treat our elders as if they are permanent fixtures of the landscape, like mountains or rivers, forgetting that they are made of flesh and bone, susceptible to the same erosion of time as everything else. We get so caught up in building our own futures that we forget to honor the foundations upon which we stand. The bus hit a pothole, jarring Sophia back to the present. She checked her watch. It was nearing 11:30. The celebration would be over. The family would have finished the cake. Her grandmother would likely be in bed, perhaps staring at the door one last time before turning out the light. The weight of disappointment settled in her chest like lead. She had failed. She was the granddaughter who was always too busy, the one who lived in the fast lane and left the people who loved her most in the rearview mirror. When the bus finally pulled into the small, dusty depot of her hometown, the air was crisp and smelled of damp earth and wood smoke. The silence was absolute, a stark contrast to the cacophony of the city. Sophia practically ran through the familiar streets, her suitcase wheels clattering loudly against the pavement. The streetlights flickered, casting long, dancing shadows. As she rounded the corner to her grandmother's house, she saw it, a soft, warm light spilling out from the kitchen window. The clock doesn't matter when the heart is in the right place. They sat together at that table as the clock on the wall struck midnight. The birthday was technically over, but for the first time in years, Sophia felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. They didn't talk about Sophia's job or her promotions. They talked about the garden. They talked about the birds that had returned for the spring. They talked about the old stories that Sophia had heard 1,000 times, but suddenly found herself wanting to memorize every word of. In the quiet of that kitchen, Sophia realized a profound truth. We spend our lives chasing things that can be replaced: money, status, possessions. But the time we spend with those who nurtured us, the ones who loved us before we were anything at all, is the only currency that truly matters. Our grandparents don't ask for much. They don't demand our success or our wealth. They only ask for a little of our time, a small piece of our busy lives, to remind them that they haven't been forgotten in the rush of the modern world. As the sun began to peek over the horizon, casting a pale pink glow over the sleeping village, Sophia watched her grandmother sleep in her favorite armchair. The wrinkles on her face were like a map of a life well lived, a life full of sacrifices made for the sake of the generations that followed. Sophia reached out and gently took her grandmother's hand. It was fragile, yes. It was aging, yes. But it was the strongest thing she had ever known. She promised herself then that she wouldn't wait for the next milestone. She wouldn't wait for a special occasion or a break in her schedule. She would come back simply because the road led here. She would come back because the light in that window shouldn't have to burn alone. Because at the end of the day, when the city lights fade and the screens go dark, all we really have is the love we shared and the people we chose to go back to. Our grandparents grow older every day, and every moment we spend with them is a victory against the relentless march of time. It is a way of saying thank you for the roots they gave us, and I love you for the wings they helped us find. Sophia leaned back, closed her eyes, and for the first time in a very long time, she breathed. She was home, and she was just in time.